Welcome to another lesson with Father IELTS. Because such a wide variety of candidates take the IELTS exam each year, we can see that some candidates make similar mistakes. In fact, sometimes based on the candidate's native language, whole groups of people can make similar mistakes, whereas groups of students that speak other languages are grouped together by their unique errors as well. We have analyzed exams and listened to previous candidates, and based on what we have found, we have compiled a list of the most common errors that are committed by candidates. Some of them in this video are more specific to the candidates who speak Chinese as a first language. However, many of the strategies that we use to make up for these errors can be utilized by speakers of all languages. Part 1. Common mistakes. Regardless of your native language, certain mistakes are common among all candidates. Sometimes in Part 2 of the test, candidates are nervous, unclear on the meaning of the question, or for a number of other reasons, don't perform well. Speaking speed. The first common mistake related to this is speed of speech. Too fast or too slow. A nervous candidate will speak very quickly, anxious to fill the 2-minute time limit. This can be detrimental because fast speech can mean improper pronunciation and mumbling, whereas speech that is too slow can have the opposite effect, leaving the examiner wondering if you are speaking slowly as you search for words in your mind. Speaking content. A second common error committed by all candidates, regardless of native language, is amount of speech, too much or too little. A challenging aspect of Part 2 of the speaking test is to control your word count simultaneously as you brainstorm and deliver your monologue. You are allowed between 2 minutes of the speech. Speaking too much and providing extra information can confuse the examiner, detracting from your message as a whole. Speaking too little, however, we might argue would be worse because it can send the message that you don't have the vocabulary or grammatical knowledge to express your response. Speaking fillers. In particular, Chinese candidates may often use certain words or phrases to fill the time before they answer a question, which occasionally can be a good way to maintain the fluency of the conversation. But too many and in inappropriate places can be distracting and cause for deduction of points. For example, if in Part 2 you are asked a follow-up question regarding a topic on education in your home country, you may use a filler to buy yourself some time as you think quickly to respond. For example, question: what do you think is one way that education in your country could be improved? Answer: well, that's a good question. I would have to say that the number of hours we spend in class could be decreased slightly. Using a filler here, which we underlined, is appropriate and in fact encouraged because it shows that you can keep the conversation flowing while you think about how to word your answer, a skill that is essential for any English speaker. However, the issue arises when you use a filler for a question that doesn't require it. For example, question: are you a student? Answer: oh, that's a good question. Yes, I am. Now, this situation does not require a filler. If you do need an extra moment, you may use but other than that, it would be inappropriate to say that's a good question because really, it isn't. It's just a simple question that requires a simple answer. Try not to use fillers mechanically, but rather where they are really needed to show that you've mastered their purpose. Missing the question. Another mistake often made by candidates, and equally important, is not answering the question. The bulleted points and follow-up questions provided for you on the task card and by the examiner in Part 2 are not suggestions for topics to discuss. They are all necessary and helpful in your response. Often, candidates will memorize pre-written responses for Part 2 that they think can fit into any situation. For example, there is a famous script that many Chinese candidates memorize about the red-crowned crane, which is a bird in China. The passage memorized is something like this. The red-crowned crane stands 5 feet tall, is black and white with red feathers on the crown of its head. It represents long life in China. Well, whatever the topic, these candidates always work it back to the red-crowned crane, like this. Describe your favorite book. Oh, my uncle once gave me a book about animals, and in it was a story about the red-crowned crane. The red-crowned crane stands 5 feet tall, is black and white with red feathers on the crown of its head. It represents long life in China. Describe a beautiful beach you like to visit. I've been to many beaches. However, there is a beach near my home that is famous because it has a red-crowned crane. The red-crowned crane stands 5 feet tall, is black and white with red feathers on the crown of its head. It represents long life in China. You see, every topic they relate back to the red-crowned crane, when in fact they have not answered the question on the task card. They have just spouted out information about a bird that they memorized. Examiners find it very easy to tell if a candidate is saying a memorized answer, and it is even easier to tell if it is not on topic. Memorizing. Similarly, memorizing responses in all parts of the speaking test can also lead to a problem. Many Chinese candidates in particular do this by training themselves to listen for one key vocabulary word and then responding with their pre-made answer. For example, question, when do you like to go to the seaside? Answer, the seaside is a lovely place to visit and it can help you relax. In this example, the candidate clearly didn't answer the question. The examiner asked when, and the candidate answered why. This is why listening to the entire question provided by the examiner is essential, because although there are no grammatical errors in the response given by the candidate, points will be deducted for failing to answer the question asked. While it is a good idea to listen for key vocabulary words that can point you in the direction of the meaning of the question, if for some reason you do not understand the question in its entirety, it's just as important to pay attention to the question word. Who, what, when, why, or how. Listening for these words will help you narrow down the type of response that you should be giving. Misusing words. Sometimes in an effort to use high-band vocabulary, some candidates will use complicated words without knowing their real meaning. During the note-taking portion of Part 2 of the speaking test, where you have 1 minute to write down vocabulary words that come to mind and sentence starters before you begin your monologue, you should use that time to recall only words that you are comfortable using. Simply mentioning complicated vocabulary, but in inappropriate context, only demonstrates to the examiner that you can memorize words, but not use them correctly. Part 2 Strategies. In order to avoid some of the common mistakes we've listed, we are going to provide some strategies that can help you to combat the tendency to commit these errors. Strategy 1. Practice by recording yourself. Practicing often before the exam can alleviate the pressure you might feel in the speaking test. You can look at sample task cards, prepare notes, and record yourself speaking. You can not only analyze your own mistakes, insert more complex vocabulary and more varied sentence structures, but you can also use this rehearsing to prepare yourself for the real exam. The more you practice, the more you will train your mind to think quickly, to take helpful notes, and to respond to the questions in a coherent way. You can practice your pronunciation, rate and timing of your speech, so that when the exam day comes, you will already have experience with Part 2 of the speaking test. You can utilize the recording and playback tool that we offer here on Father IELTS to help you practice this. Strategy 2. Spend time learning to take notes correctly. Before the day of the exam, candidates should spend ample time viewing sample task cards and taking notes for 1 minute immediately following. This will not only help you practice writing quickly the words and sentence starters you will need to help guide your response, but also will help you to realize how many notes you can realistically take within that 1 minute period. Without multiple practice sessions, it can be easy to both over and underestimate how long that minute really is. After practicing even a few times by timing yourself for 1 minute as you take notes on the card, you will have a better feel for how long you have. In addition, practicing taking notes can help you to get better at identifying every aspect of the question on the task card, which will help your answer reach that 2-minute mark. You can utilize the timer tool here on our website to help you time yourself when you're taking notes. Strategy 3. Stick with what you know. Of course, while you're still in study mode before the exam date, stretch your knowledge of new vocabulary and challenge yourself with complicated grammatical structures. However, on the day of the exam, don't try to use any aspect of English that you're not comfortable with. Using a complicated vocabulary word in a strange context, or making a grammatical error while using a structure that is actually unnecessary is more penalized than a response that relies on your solid knowledge. The day of the exam is not the time to be experimenting with new vocabulary that you're not ready to use. Use your practice time to get as comfortable as possible with new, complex vocabulary and structures, so that when the time comes for the exam, you can use them correctly. Strategy 4. Less is more when it comes to fillers and idiomatic expressions, that is. Memorizing these phrases that native speakers use to guide a conversation is a good idea, but they can't be employed correctly without practice. Remember that you will only get points for appropriate fillers, idioms, and high-band vocabulary if they're used correctly. Don't fill your response with them without being 100% sure of their meaning, because that can cause more harm than good to your score. To sum up, recall that in order to prepare yourself for the speaking test, particularly for part 2 of the test, you must practice, record yourself, and analyze your responses. Take note of these common mistakes we have discussed here and employ the strategies we've offered so that you can be aware of the traps that many candidates fall into, so that you won't. See you next time.
Thanks again for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe. We have over 75 video lessons that were designed by an IELTS examiner who knows how to help you get the score you deserve. If you'd like to access more Father IELTS videos, more sample tasks, worksheets, and even use some of our practice exams, well, check out our full courses over on Udemy by clicking on the links in the description below. Those links will give you 85% off the full course price and give you full access to all of the materials we offer. I wish you the best of luck on your IELTS exam. See you next time.